Okay, hey everybody, listen, welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. It is Thursday night, which means we are conducting our weekly strategy session. Once again, I have Dustin Doderay, Brad Vanderleit here with me. And tonight we're going to have a really cool topic. We're going to dive into our intuition's greatest competition. Now, in the past couple podcasts, we've talked about many things, but intuition has always been brought up. And tonight we're going to talk about its greatest competitor. Now, we've touched on this a little bit in the previous podcast, but tonight we're going to do a deep dive because there's a lot of really cool things that people need to know that will make them infinitely safer. So let's cut to the intro. We'll be back in 60 seconds and we'll hit tonight's topic.
Many people understand that they can at any time become the target of a violent criminal assault. These same people know that they have a life, family, and property worth defending. Criminals understand that violence is its own language. Violence is not the sport of competition. Violence is not the art of fighting. Violence is about one thing: destruction. There are those who believe that violence, even in self-defense, is morally wrong. Then there are good people like you who know that defending yourself, family, and others, as well as your property, is not only a personal right, but a duty within a civilized society. Understand, violent assaults are won before they occur. People who learn strategy survive. People who do not will not. For those brave people who believe life is precious and worth defending,
welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, okay, we are back. And as I said before we cut to the intro, tonight we are going to talk about our intuition's greatest competitor. Now, just so that everybody's on the same page, intuition, right? This is probably one of my favorite sayings regarding intuition, is that we all are born with our innate survival system. Now, your intuition is not always the loudest voice. It's like an internal dialogue. It's not always the loudest voice, but it is the wisest voice. Okay? Intuition is what we have to learn to listen to keep ourselves safer, right? We are blessed. We have inherited from birth a 200,000-year-old survival system, right? And it talks to us. It sends us messages through our intuition. And so we've talked again about the messengers of intuition, the feelings that you have, whether that's fear, apprehension, a gut instinct, a nagging thought, persistent thought, the use of dark humor, all of these different signals that go from low level to high level in terms of threat awareness. So tonight we want to focus in on the greatest competitor to our intuition. Now, another way to look at this is, well, let me actually finish the statement, I guess, because if intuition's on one side of the coin, and that is the wisest voice, and remember, our intuition is always about two things. One, it's always about something, and second, it always has our best interest at heart. So if intuition's on one side, and that's the side that keeps us safe, what's on the other side of it? What is its direct and greatest competition?
Denial.
Denial. So you have intuition versus denial. Okay, now denial is a process, just like intuition is a process. But let me just expand this out one notch here. We have intuition versus denial, but we also have the logical brain versus the wild brain. Okay, and maybe just real quick, if Brad, why don't you break down for people, just to give people a quick synopsis, the difference between the logical brain and the wild brain, just so that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, so our wild brain is, it's where our intuition comes from. It's where our intuition lies. It's sending us those signals. It's the natural responses, the first responses that we have when we are faced with a critical incident. But what happens is a lot of times we get into our intellectual mind, into our intellectual brain. And that's the part where we start doubting, we start questioning, we start telling ourselves that we're being paranoid. Oh, this is probably nothing, or I don't want to be a bitch. This is where we justify not listening to our intuition, not listening to, our wild brain, and just kind of trying to benefit the doubt, the situation away, and where we try to rationalize, excuse make, minimize what we're facing in front of us, whatever situation that might be.
Perfect. Okay, 100%, right? The logical brain, survival. That's it. It doesn't, or sorry, the wild brain is about survival. The wild brain, let me, I was going to break down the logical brain real quick, but exactly what Brad just said, right? The logical brain, when it comes to a survival situation, cannot do anything for us. And that's really tough for a lot of people to hear, right? Because in our society, the logical thinking, rationalization, justification, the logical brain wants to examine something from every single possible conceivable angle. It is basing its judgments and information off saying, well, what should be, what should happen, what could happen, what would I like to have happen? I mean, it is just such a encumbered system. It's slow, it's plotted, it's all this logic and reason. And of course, when we're talking about violence, violence adheres to none of that. So the logical brain can do nothing for you in a survival situation. And that's such an important concept, I think, that people need to hear. Whereas the wild brain, it doesn't care about reason. Just like Brad said, it doesn't care to try to convince you of anything. It is simply dealing with what is happening. It's seeing something for what it is. Okay? And it cares only about our survival. So if we're going to talk about intuition and we're going to talk about denial, we're talking about the logical brain versus the wild brain. We're talking about the same thing. Okay, so one of the things, let's break it down. But Dustin, can you run down, or Brad? I don't care. But there's 5 different, it's a process. Denial is a process. There's 5 stages to that process. And it's important that you recognize the 5 stages, because you can not only then identify, denial as it's creeping into your life, because that's what's going to be blocking the message of intuition or intuition potentially. So do you want to run down the 5 guys?
Yeah. So one of the first ones is when people try to minimize things. So
100%.
something happens and right away you just try to make it seem so much smaller. Like, oh, it's not that big a deal because of A, B, C, and D, or it's not as bad as you think because of this, that, and the other thing. So it's just trying to take something seem far less important, significant than what it really is, which is, just one form of denying that it's actually happening or exists or what have you.
Perfect. Okay, so the first thing they try to do is they try to minimize what's happening. Brad, you got another one?
Yeah, we can make excuses, right?
Okay.
Why it's just an excuse of why it's not what it is. It's like, oh well, it's like the example that we used with the old man that wants to just get a kiss. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, he's just lonely, and like he's just an old man. It's like we make excuses that it's like, oh, this and that, and the next thing it's like, well, no, that's making an excuse. That's living in denial, right?
Perfect. So they minimize it. They make excuses. What's another one?
They'll justify.
Perfect.
So just another random example, like jaywalking. So you jaywalk across the street and someone's like, well, why'd you do that? Why didn't you use a crosswalk? It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, I looked, clearly there was no cars coming. So really, what's the problem? Nobody got hurt. There's no real risk there. So you're trying to justify that your actions were okay, even though they weren't necessarily the right thing to do in the moment.
Yeah. And especially when you're talking about violence, or imagine as a parent talking about justifying the actions away that a friend, a relative, or even a stranger of a certain behavior pattern towards your kids. And then you justify that behavior away. Right? Clearly, it's a process of denial. What's one more? There's we have
2 more.
2 more. Yeah, I said just what's one more? What's that? Sorry.
I said to rationalize.
Yeah, rationalization. Yeah.
So again, you're trying to sort of explain the logic behind your actions or your choices.
Yeah.
And trying to convince other people why it's okay. Right.
Yep. And what's the last one?
Flat out refusal.
That's right. You flat out refuse to accept anything that's going on, right? There's people out there that just refuse to believe that there's people in this world that will hurt them if they're given an opportunity. They refuse to believe that evil exists. They refuse to believe that somebody could do X, Y, and Z to them. They just flat out refuse to see the evidence or to recognize something and see it for what it is. Okay, so these are the 5 different aspects or steps within the process of denial, right? Rationalization, justification, minimization, excuse making, and flat out refusal to see something. Okay, now, if intuition is the messenger, right, that helps us survive. So it's the messenger of intuition helps us survive. It is a process that keeps us safe. then denial also has to exist for a reason. So why does denial even exist? If it's so counterintuitive and so detrimental to our survival, why is denial a part of the human process? Well, because it protects us from something as well, and it protects us from unwanted information. Right? That's it. It protects us from unwanted information. And there are times and situations where being protected from unwanted information, when you suffer trauma or something like that, is powerful. And so you in that moment may have to rationalize things away or justify, minimize, excuse make, or even flat out refuse to accept it. But here's the thing. The denial process, although it can protect us from unwanted information, it is never a long-term strategy. It does not have within it innately the survivable value. So short-term, yes. Even mid to long-term, no. So it can compartmentalize us from an experience or aspects of an experience that slowly we can then unpack and begin to process and express in healthier ways or in less traumatic ways. So I don't want to, sorry, go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to say, probably important just to kind of point out on that note, like you said, there's moments in time where like that might actually serve you well. But just for people watching, it's like, yes, 100%, but you need to know that that's happening.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that you can then take the proper steps, when it's appropriate, to make sure you're not stuck in that lane, right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I think the thing is too, like if you get hit with a trauma and you go and you rationalize it away, or you're flat out refusing to accept it, or whatever you're doing, in that moment you're probably not that aware of it. But the fact that you are aware of the process on a bigger scale allows you to come to that. Control can only ever follow awareness. And
at some point you can realize.
Of course.
At some point you catch yourself and be like, oh man, I'm totally doing this. I'm rationalizing or I'm justifying. And then that's what allows you to course correct, right?
100%. And you know what? Even after just what I just said, there's many times where exactly what you're talking about, we know in the moment we're rationalizing it away, but we're okay with it. Like you can be aware that you're in a certain amount of denial, or you're minimizing or justifying. You can totally be aware in the moment. You're just consciously saying, I'm okay with that right now because it's serving what purpose? To protect me from some unwanted information, for some really hard truths that I maybe just need to process in smaller bites. So it's never just one way, kind of a, one size fits all type thing. You might not be aware of it. You can be absolutely aware of it. You might be aware of it or not aware of it, and then you become aware of it. Like it's going to be different for each person depending on the situation. So ideally, go ahead, Brad.
One of the things that popped in my head just now is that it's easy. It's easier, right? Like to be in that state of denial. No matter, it actually doesn't really matter usually what the situation is, because it's like, we've all been there. We've all did things where we've rationalized, minimized, excuse made, flat out refusal. We all have done that in certain areas of our lives. And it's one of those things. It's like, because if you choose to not be in denial, if you choose not to do that, that means you got to take some sort of action. And a lot of times it seems like it's easier not to take an action and just deny it away, so you do not have to do a hard action.
Okay, I'm going to debate this with you.
Okay? Perfect.
Because at first glance, I would be like 100% agree with you. And the context with which I know you're talking about, I agree with you. I've said it that way before, 100%. But at the same time, I've caught myself on it, and I just want to see what your opinion is in this. Is denial easier? Because denial is an action. Now, do you take the action subconsciously? But you say it's easier, right? But it's only easier when you have no other alternative. But here's the thing. If you go into denial, and all out of the 5, you go into denial, all except for one, and I think I could argue that the one subconsciously still leads in one direction and one direction only. And I think that is worry, right? And that's going to be a massive part when we talk about the two processes. But if something's happening, that something is it could be a threat to myself, or it could be a threat to my kids, and I begin to rationalize the behavior of family members, or it doesn't matter if it's family members, a stranger, anybody in between, but I rationalize away or justify or minimize, or I make excuses. On some level, I am choosing, maybe if it's not conscious, I am choosing and saying, I don't want to know. I don't want to look at this in any other light other than this. So I've made a decision. But because the fact that I am rationalizing, justifying, minimizing, or making excuses takes fucking effort. I mean, imagine if I did something and you came to me and said, "Why did you do that?" Or even better, I do something, you never even asked me about it, but the second I see you, I spend an hour rationalizing why I did what I did. Yet you go, "I don't really give a fuck. I never asked. Doesn't affect me at all. Do whatever the fuck you want to do." But here I am rationalizing to you why, because I'm looking for some sort of acceptance. I'm looking for people to join my team to help me rationalize, to deny what's happening. So I think that those things lead to worry, and worry is horrible. Worry is toxic. Yet, as human beings, we live in states of worry and anxiety, not fear. But we'll get to that in a second. So let's go back and forth on this a little bit, because is intuition really harder than denial?
No, like, no. I think it's just like
He
almost.
says it like, no, but you're still not right. And here's
no.
why. No, but you're still full of shit. Now, let me explain. I can't
Well,
wait.
see, because it's almost like that the first part of a moment where it's like because this stuff could happen so quickly, you know, and then again, like when you don't have a choice, right? Then it's like listening to your intuition ultimately is, like we said, it's always about something and always has your best interest at heart. So deep down, we fucking know. Whatever that happens to be, we know, right? And it's like we've all, like, if you take the action that your intuition is telling you to take, I think it ultimately, we said, even in the end, it's going to be easier. But just with the intellectual mind in that moment, it's easy to just doubt it and to just rationalize, accept it, just to be in denial.
Okay, why is it easier?
Like, but I don't. But on a long-term scale, I think that you're going to get more pain by living in denial than you are going to be in intuition.
100%.
Right?
Like I said, we all agree that denial as a coping mechanism at the right time protects us from there is that short-term. I don't know if I want to use this, say, survivable value, but there is the short-term benefit of protecting us, from unwanted information. We don't get overloaded and flooded. So 100%. We're all in agreement too that just long-term, the survivable value is not there. So I agree with you. Like, denial process for most people is easier, but see, the word easier is what I'm taking exception with, because I'm trying to draw a contrast. It's not easier. It actually leads to more fucking pain. It's actually more work. You spend more energy. Listen, we all know people, like, one of our favorite sayings is, who are you trying to convince? Who are you trying to convince, me or you? I hear you talking and you're spouting out all this rationalization. You're justifying shit. You're minimizing shit. Matter of fact, if I see you 3 days in a row, that's all you want to fucking talk about. You're putting a tremendous amount of effort in trying to convince one of us as to what you're doing, the actions that you're taking and the perception you have on it. And it's not me. It's not me you're convincing. So you're putting in a ton of work. So the word to me isn't easier, because it's not easier. It's a tremendous amount of fucking work. And it leads to worry and anxiety, which puts your body in a state of dis-ease. So it's fucking horrific for you. It's toxic, but it is conditioned, right? It is a paradigm. It is reinforced. And that's where the feeling of, that's why it comes to us with such ease. It's not easier, but comes to us with ease. Dustin, you want to jump in on this? Yeah,
just kind of listening to you guys kind of go back and forth on that. Something just kind of hit me, and I'm sort of just curious, like, do people tend to choose denial because I'm not afraid, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's just sort of like they don't want to admit what's actually going on, because, I mean, maybe it's something that they're afraid of, but it's just, you know what I mean? Like, they don't want to admit that that could be actually happening because of all the things that they would then have to feel or have to do because of it. I don't know if that's making any sense.
It makes 100%
kind of like
sense.
Brad touched on it earlier. You said something along those lines too. And it's like, and I'm just wondering, like, is that maybe where you were kind of still coming from, Brad, when you said it's easy? Is it because they see it in the moment, they think, well, maybe that's not that they're necessarily rationally, like, choosing it, but do they end up in denial because they think that might be easier than having to
Well,
actually
they don't.
deal
They
with.
don't think though. They're conditioned is my. Just because
Yeah,
Christy asked to
think's not a
repeat
good
the
word.
question.
Yeah.
The question we're debating is we made a statement about intuition versus denial, and why do people go in denial? And we'd rather just use the word easier. That denial is easier for people than intuition is, and so they tend to flow to the denial portion of it. And kind of what we're debating is it easier? But again, it's not easier. It's harder and it's more work. Like, we just have to see that for what it is. I'm not going to leave the point until we recognize that denial is infinitely harder. There's a time when has some value to it, but it's hard work, right? I mean, is it more natural for us to suppress and repress our emotions or to express our emotions? I'm not saying again, it's one of the things. What do people do more? Well, fuck yeah, we suppress and repress our emotions, 100%. But what's easier? That's harder. Anything that makes your body, anything that happens to you that destroys your state and physiology and mental health and all that stuff is not easier. It cannot be easier because we're not meant to live in those states.
I think that's what I was trying to get at. Like, do people choose? I say choose like it's a choice.
No, I
Like,
get what
do
you're
you know
saying.
what I mean? They're not intellectually choosing it, but do they end up in denial because they're fuck, I had the words and I lost it, but like they're trying to protect themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, they are trying, but you're on it. But tie it back to the conditioning.
See, I think one of the things that kind of popped in my head and is where it's almost like denial becomes that. I don't want to choose my words; it will be in another debate. but like it's like denial can be used as a delay, and until that denial is ripped away and you could see the situation clearly for what it is, and then there is no other option but to not be in denial. If that makes sense, it's like okay, like I'm going to deny what's happening in front of me, all this thing, benefit to doubt myself to death, and then the situation evolves so much where it's like now I can no longer be in denial because it was blatantly obvious of what I'm facing. Whereas if we would have listened to our intuition right from the beginning,
So you're saying denial's harder now. You've reversed the process.
No. Like, but
Because that's what you just said, right? That it's harder, which I know you already know that it is.
But we tend to go into.
Okay, but that's what we're
now.
trying to peel back. Why
Yes.
though? Because what you just said too is like you go into denial and there's a little bit of it's protecting us until you cannot deny it anymore. It's ripped away from you. Well, what you're talking about is the terror barrier. Like if something happens and I go into denial, I rationalize, justify, minimize, make excuses, or flat out refuse to deny it. I put my head in the sand. I deny, rationalize, justify, whatever, but it builds because that threat, when we're talking about violence, that threat builds until a point it's undeniable. To all of a sudden now, your child's missing. All of a sudden now, your child has been sexually assaulted and multiple times until all of a sudden the knife's at your throat, the gun's at your head, the lead pipes, smashing into your skull. Like, then you're in terror barrier. Typically right before it happens and you go, oh fuck, you can't deny this. It's like that moment of a car crash where you're like, fuck. There's nothing you can do. It's happening. That's the terror barrier. And then people go to condition black. So again, the idea is that, but what the whole first part of this is, why is it easier? Because I get what you said. Why do we go to that with less effort? And I keep throwing out there the conditioning. What is the conditioning? What's the root of this? There's the intuition versus denial, logical brain versus wild brain. So the intuition and the wild brain are our survival mechanisms. The logical brain, right, is and the denial process are together. So what's the root of what's happening here? In our society, one of these has been made a master and one of these has been made a servant, and it has been conditioned and reinforced beyond conscious thought of human beings. We viscerally slide into one of these things. That's the root of what's happening.
And I think where my head goes to is because how strong the social contracts have been laid upon us, right? And it's like, because now if they are able to, if they are affecting our intellectual mind and making us stay in an intellectual mind, they're making us question like, oh, it's like, well, I don't want to say this because my identity is not somebody who would say something like this, right? I'm not going to, like, let's use how women have been conditioned not to be rude because they come off as a bitch when they're actually, like that's not the case, and it's like, but we all have had that type of conditioning through social contracts because of the society that we live in.
Yep. So again, though, like, what part of this is that the wild brain? Has the
No.
wild brain been conditioned, or what part has been conditioned for what part of the women have been conditioned to be passive, to say if you speak out, you're going to be perceived as rude, you're going to be perceived as a cold-hearted bitch? Like, what part of all of us, men, women, what part is being conditioned? Is it the wild brain or is it the logical brain?
Logical.
Logic.
So what's happening in those moments? When a woman feels terror and fear of a guy, and this could be someone at work in a crowded office building or a contractor that's called out to her home to help do some repairs, and she has this feeling of fear, yet she can't, and it's a complete intangible. She can't articulate why she has this fear. Something about the way he stands, the way he looks, the way he walks, something about his energy, even though he's smiling and saying please and thank you. It's the way he looks at her, it's the tone. There's something, some intangible thing, like to her. It's tangible, it's there, but she doesn't know how to measure it. But she feels terrified, yet she doesn't want to say anything because she goes, I have nothing to base it on. She doesn't want to say anything because she goes, well, my mom taught me that a polite woman, never to be rude to somebody. That's not ladylike. What part is that? What part? It's the logical fucking brain.
Yeah.
When I said at the beginning of this that society reveres the logical brain, like, I don't know what people hear when I say that. They think like, yes, the logical brain. Yes, Einstein was revered in our society. Like the mathematical genius, like logical. And I don't know if it's just me, but I think a lot of people when they hear logical brain think academia. They think like, the logical brain. Like I can do science and I have intricate math formulas and all this type of stuff. The logical brain is the logical brain. It's been conditioned to use reason. It's been conditioned to apply that to perceptions. It's been conditioned to understand social status and social credit and all of these different things, right? Like cultural status, social status. Like that's where all of this conditioning happens. To the wild brain, we're a fucking species. The wild brain, it's running off animal instincts. It doesn't take time to recognize, yes, but the person is an educated person. He's a non-educated person. He's culturally this or socially this. He makes this much money or that. He dresses, doesn't care. And it doesn't care to try to convince any of us when it comes to survival. It simply feels what it feels, and it's looking for anything that could cause us harm. So to me, it's like, we're talking about intuition's greatest competitor. So how do we wade through all the bullshit? There's two types of people, right? The unweaponized, the weaponized. If I want to be really general with things, the fucking weaponized people have reversed the conditioning. The wild brain is the fucking master. Because if you don't have your life, you don't fucking have anything. It's like everyone wants to prioritize their values. What do you value more? I value time with my family. That's your top value. Yep. Where's your health? Health is important to me, but it's number 3. Well, you're fucking dead. You didn't take care of your health. It wasn't the top priority. So guess what? No more time with the family. Like health, number 1, because if you're healthy, not only can you be there in a way deeper, more meaningful, richer capacity for your family, but you can be there fucking longer. Like I'm just using that as an analogy, right? But we're talking survival versus our logical existence in this world. How many people right now have Instagram? How many people posted today on Instagram or did this, whatever? Rationalize, justify, minimize, make excuses, or flat out deny what value that has in your life. Right? You know what I mean? And it has a role in our life, and there's nothing wrong with those things, but we will often over-rationalize. Yet, that has nothing to do with survival. That's not going to enhance the quality of our life in most ways. Does that kind of make sense? So to me, it's like, if right now, the unweaponized people, the logical brain is the master. So when they get somebody gives them a bad vibe, I'm sitting out in the restaurant with my wife, and there's a table of guys, and the second they walk in, I have a bad feeling, and I'm like, fuck. My intuition goes, yeah, right now you're okay. 20 minutes from now, an hour from now, when these fuckers keep drinking, the tone, all the ad, you're going to have a fucking problem. They will look over, they will say something to you, they will say something to your wife, they'll look at, like whatever, I can feel it. And in that moment, I either listen to the master and protect myself and take actions early, or I rationalize it away. I have every right to be here, that blah, 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 blah. I justify, minimize, make excuses. Which are you going to listen to? Because those two parts of yourself, the logical brain, the wild brain, they go to war. they instantaneously go to war. So the unweaponized, if the logical brain's the master and the wild brain's the servant, who's going to win that debate 9 out of 10 times? The logical brain, 9 out of 10 times. 100%. If you flip it and the wild brain becomes the master and the logical brain becomes the servant, does that mean that we don't use our logical brain? Does it mean that there's no value? Of course not. It just means that it's compartmentalized into the right place. We have full access to it. But the wild brain serves us in so many different ways. Always about what? It's always about something when you have and it always has your best interest at heart. If I'm interviewing life coaches, and you say, well, one of these coaches has a lot of great ideas, grand schemes and grand visions, and lots of different ideas for how one might accomplish these grand visions and grand things. But it's very self-serving. Some of it is very, surface. Some of it is deeper, whatever it is. And the other guy, maybe he's not as revered, maybe he's not as known or popular, but I'll tell you 2 things that you need to know about this life coach. He only gives a fuck about your well-being, and he will always pick up when there's anything that could threaten that well-being. Who do you want to have as a life coach? I mean, I'm going with the guy that maybe is a little less popular, but I know cares about me on the deepest, most meaningful way. Maybe that's a silly analogy, but
I just thought of an analogy, and you guys can let me know what you think of it. But in regards to like the wild brain and the logical brain, I'm just thinking like if you had like a military base or whatever, let's say, and they've got like surface to air missiles, like anti-aircraft type missiles, and they're the greatest missiles ever, and the enemy's got the greatest planes ever. So the logical brain is like those missiles, but the wild brain is the radar system. So it's like, that's your early warning sign. Something's coming, trouble's coming. Doesn't matter how good the missile is if you don't know the enemy's plane is coming.
Yeah.
Until you see it, because you're already dead.
Yes.
So I don't know. Is that a good
It's
analogy?
beautiful because it shows the synergisticness. Like maybe the master and the servant is too divisive still, But I like that analogy because like what has to come first? But when you detect something, I mean, the logical brain assists. Like it can't. Like, you get what I mean. I like the analogy of what you're talking about because it just shows. Again, we're trying to reinforce the hierarchy here of people that live more in the intuitive world, right? And use the logical brain as support systems because clearly we have to have and use our logical, cognitive, rationalizing processes to to survive in this world 100%. We're just talking about, and I'm trying to give a sharp contrast, the importance of giving power back to the wild brain, to your intuitiveness, your primalness inside of you. And there's lots of people that in certain events, they're very logical, very logical, very logical. And then all of a sudden, this just hit my head, but I can think of one guy in particular. In his everyday life, he's just fucking logical. Like, I mean, the logic brain rules this guy. Rationalizing, justifying, pre-plotting, all of this, the way that he navigates his life. All but one area. This guy is an avid skier, and he does not like to ski on, groomed slopes. He likes to backcountry ski. When you backcountry ski, there's one thing about him that is very different. He's fucking 100% intuition. He has all the logical, technical skills, survival skills, skiing skills, rescue skills, all of this stuff, right? That's all there. But when he's back there, what slope he goes, where he hikes, what he jumps off of, what he does, all this stuff, intuitive. He's in touch with the primal side of himself, and that's what guides him. Again, think of some of the best hunters in the world. Do they have and do they utilize the logical side of themselves? The trained and restrained and strategies, tactics, and tools and stuff? Of course. But at the same time, they're intuitive. The master and the servant. You know what I mean? What activates? The radar activates when they hunt. And it's this thing where people are like, there's just something about this person, man. It's different. It's like they're, again, there's people go, oh, that guy's a hunter, but that guy's a hunter. Like that guy eats, sleeps, and shit. That guy breathes it. That guy, you know what I mean? There's something natural about him. Well, we all have that. That's the intuitive, primal part of us that we're all born with. But you go from a very young age to preschools and kindergartens and elementaries and junior highs and high schools and universities and colleges and all kinds of exams, all kinds of things that begin to contain and compartmentalize and structure your thinking. That's what, you know what I mean? Drive a vehicle. They structure how you drive a vehicle. Follow the rules, follow the signs, go, stop. This is what we live in. This is society. And there's many great benefits to being in a society. Be a fucking much harder, much bleaker existence if we're just all running around in the wild trying to survive. So we need that. I like that part of it. But it doesn't mean that I can't be in tune with and I can't, restructure and make sure that that intuitive side of myself, that's always going to be the top dog. I might not use it every day. Well, you do in certain ways. You get what I mean. We use it when we drive. You intuit whether a guy's going to stop at the light or not. If you're good, you can do it. But anyways, I think you get the analogy with that. So you made a comment, Dustin, and I want to talk about this because you were talking about when people worry and like, why do they worry? Because I said that denial leads to worry. And worry we do not live in states of fear, right? We do not choose imminent events to worry about, right? We don't choose imminent events to worry about because imminent events, especially crisis, do not elicit worry. They elicit fucking action. And this is the whole thing about denial that we need people to see and again understand the intuitives. You open your front door and there's fucking hot lava from a volcano rolling up to your front door. You don't close the door, go sit on your couch and start worrying about what's going to happen when the lava gets there. You get what I mean? That imminent crisis doesn't cause worry, it causes action. You fucking open your door and you fucking run.
Well, it's like if you fall out of a boat and you can't swim, you don't worry about what's going to happen to you.
Yeah, you worry about what it would be like to drown or worrying about that shark that might come. Yeah, you're fucking trying not to drown in that moment. You don't have any energy or time to worry about something. So the whole idea of like understanding that as one of these processes, right? That we don't choose to worry about these imminent events. And yet, why do people do that? People, when they worry, is often how they replace the feelings of helplessness. Does that make sense? When we actually are looking and going, what is something that could happen that is like catastrophic? If there's any situation where we go, I don't know what to do, I don't have an answer. Now this comes back to the original question. Why do people slip into denial? They can slip into denial when there's room to worry. When the event's not imminent. That's the only time they can slip into denial. Like we didn't say this off the top, but let me use the analogy right now. I'm standing here, there's a guy, two guys, 6'8", guy's got a knife in his hand, he's threatening my fucking life. He's not asking for my wallet, he's not asking for my car, he's just threatening my life. For whatever fucking reason, doesn't really matter. Am I worried about him cutting my throat? Not really, because if that assault's happening, and he all of a sudden goes from where he's threatening my life to swinging the blade at my throat, I'm not worried because there's no time to worry. It's imminent. Back it out a little bit. Now you see a guy, 30 feet away leaning up against a wall and he's got a gun clearly visible in his waistband, or he's got a knife clearly visible, machete clearly visible in his hand, but he's not looking at you. He's talking with somebody else and it's like they're waiting for somebody. Could I worry in that situation? Well, of course I can. Because there's time. So I can start worrying that, oh, fuck, that guy's got a gun. Like, what the fuck is that? Is he going to shoot somebody? Is he going to attack me? Is he waiting for somebody? Am I in the wrong place at the wrong time? Is that person that he's looking for going to come out from behind me? Like, and then what do? Well, I either take an action or I begin to rationalize. That can't be real. It's the fucking middle of downtown Edmonton. Like, why would he be sitting there with a gun? If that guy had a gun, someone would have called the police. So I rationalize away and I keep walking. I don't turn around. I don't do anything. I just rationalize. I justify. Well, maybe it's the only way they could be doing that, maybe they're undercover cops, or maybe they're shooting a movie, or they're getting ready to do a play or something like that. That's the only reason why somebody would have that out there. Why would anybody be walking around? And even if he was a bad guy, he wouldn't be showing his gun like that. He wouldn't have the machete out in the open. So I justify away. Minimize, well, they're on the other side of the street and they're not looking at me. So I'm not worried about shit. I don't know these guys. I'm just going to mind my own fucking business. So I just minimize the whole thing. Right? I can make excuses or I can flat out refuse it. Well, this is part of what I want people to recognize, is that our intuition, our wild brain, our survival nature, the primal side of ourselves has competition. It's not just denial. Well, it's denial, but it's other ways. People get into habits of worrying. And they believe that worrying, I mean, true or false, people have adopted and turned worrying into a fucking art. They use worrying like one of the greatest coping mechanisms, because anytime that we feel we have no control, what we can do to get control is worry. And the brain and the imagination is so powerful that we can conjure all kinds of shit to worry about. You ever had your brain struggle for something to worry about? I've never had my brain doesn't struggle at all. When I want to worry, my brain's like, oh boy, I got some worries for you, motherfucker. Pick a topic. Any topic. Here, you ready? Here we go. Oh, you, this guy, you were going to sleep. Fuck you. Worry. Try and sleep through this. Not a chance in hell.
So true.
It's 100%, right? Like this is what we do. But what I'm trying to reveal tonight, the value in this, is recognizing that we do not worry about imminent events. So it means if you're feeling worry, the event is not imminent. You're worried about something future-based, okay? Now you have to recognize something. Why am I choosing to worry about the thing that I'm worrying about? Because it's clearly not an imminent event. Now, is that logical? Well, I'm just using logic. I know that this is my worry. I'm logically plotting what could be in 6 months, 7 months. And maybe that is connected and grounded in a lot of reality, but you're choosing to worry about it. And what happens is the fact that you find yourself worrying about something, that actually often means that the thing you're worrying about is not actually likely to happen, because your brain subconsciously picks something to worry about that it recognizes is not actually likely to happen, because that's what allows you to worry about it. Have you ever done this? You ever had this? You get some potentially bad news. It's not imminent. And so you're like, oh, fuck. So your brain goes into the future and your brain finds you plenty of shit to worry about. Now, in your list of things to worry about, you compartmentalize that list. You make a short list. And one or two of the things you push off to the side. And so you worry about something. And you worry, maybe it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month or more, 2 months. And then all of a sudden, as the event unfolds and you come closer to the moment of reckoning, when that moment happens and it turns out that your greatest fears are being realized, and it's crushing and it's painful, 99.9% of the time, the thing that you're worried about, you go, oh, fuck, it's not that thing. It's one of the first things that you bumped off the list. And you go, you know what? I thought about that and I ruled it out right away. But fuck, I knew it. Why? Because the reality and the truth of that was too much. It was just too much. So your brain just went, no, like, you get what I mean? Because there's nothing you can do about that thing. There's nothing you can do about that thing. And if there's nothing you can do about that thing, you can't worry about it. You won't worry about it. You'll worry about all the other things. That's how our brain, that's the way that our brain is wired. And yet, we can, again, like, in certain situations, you can say, like, if that was an illness of some kind, and you go, well, there's nothing, if it turns out to be this, there's nothing I can do about that. So you're like, your brain rules out right away. So you go to something else. This is bad, and you worry. Then you find out it wasn't. It was the first thing. And you're like, fuck, I knew it. And there's that feeling again, like there's this helplessness. But the thing is, if this is an imminent crisis of violence, a crisis, whether it's natural, mechanical, or the human crisis, there's no value in that. Denying that, rationalizing, justifying, minimizing, putting that off will get you killed. Lives will be like your kids. Everything you care about is exposed and vulnerable because you're choosing not to see something. And that's one of the things that I have written down here that is like one of life's most powerful questions. And the question is this: in these moments when we have this battle going on, and you maybe become aware that you're rationalizing whatever it is, the denial process, you're worrying about something. And you go, if I'm worrying about something, that means that that's not likely the thing that's actually happening. What am I choosing not to see? You think about that for a second. You stop for a second. What am I choosing not to see? Because that's what this is. As conditioned as our logical brain is, as revered as it is, as powerful and as powerfully as society has reinforced that part of ourselves, okay? One question can dismantle that thing. A moment of clarity where you go, what am I choosing not to see? Because I'm worrying, I'm denying, I'm right, whatever. I'm choosing not to see something. You might be worrying on something that's connected to the event, which is why you think, no, that's how you can rationalize it. But what am I choosing not to see? That question is massive, and that should be a question that is written down somewhere that you have, and in moments of struggle or times where, you're in these situations of stress or worry or anxiety or whatever it is, asking yourself, what am I choosing not to see? And get better at answering that question. What's the saying? Like, see it for what it is, not worse than it is. What am I choosing not to see? Just see it for what it is. Accept it because it is what it is. And if it's something that you truly have no control over, worrying's not going to change it. So, and of course we can see the effects of how that plays out when it comes to violence. The longer you deny, rationalize, justify, minimize, make excuses, or whatever, flat out deny, the longer that happens when there's an imminent, like when there's a threat, that threat gets closer and closer to becoming an imminent threat, the more danger you're in. The harder it becomes to stop the tide, to save yourself, to do something. You have to catch things. We've talked before, like the aggression continuum. When it's low on the aggression continuum, someone's down in this little trigger phase, like low escalation, and then they start building and escalating and deteriorating up to the crisis where it becomes physical, right? The lower they are, the earlier you take action, the easier it is. But we all know something. There's a point on their deterioration, there's a point on their escalation where all of your countermeasures to de-escalate, deter, or remove will fail. There's a point when they just will not work. And then the points just below that, they become infinitely harder to have any type of success with that. And that's really, really important for people to understand and to hear. Does that track?
Yeah.
What do you guys have? Anything off that? That was a rant.
That was spot on, though. I don't have anything to add to that.
Hard to follow it up.
Okay, I'm going to throw in two other questions then. And I just had them in my notes and I want to read them, but it ties back a little bit to the imagination and our ability to conjure worry. Like we're never at a short supply of that, right? So I gave you one of the power questions, which was, what am I choosing not to see? And anytime that you have intense worry, you can ask yourself another question, right? So I'm going to give you two more questions. One of this is, could this happen to me or my children? Right, if you're talking about, threats or things that could this happen to me or my children? It could be health, could be threat, could be whatever it is. But could this happen? And of course, what's the answer when you say, could this happen? Well, the answer is always going to be yes, because anything could happen. So that question in and of itself only is good to force you to go, okay, listen, could what I'm worried about happen? Yeah, okay, it could happen. But then a follow-up question that really clarifies and anchors that it's a better question is this happening? Or will this happen? And again, it really comes back to, you see how it's just another angle of like, what am I choosing not to see? Is this happening to me, or will this happen to me? And why I really like zeroing in on the fact when people ask, will this happen to me? Because that question will be answered by your intuition. That question is like the bat, remember the bat phone, like a hotline to Commissioner Gordon and Batman? You know what I mean? Anyways, really, if you watched the show in the 70s, they really had it, but that's dating myself a bit. But you pick that up, you got a direct line. Will this happen to me? You get so good at asking yourself questions, will this happen to me, is such a better question that the messenger of intuition will respond. You'll respond with a feeling. If I ever ask myself a question, will this happen to me? And all of a sudden I feel fear, I feel apprehension, I feel a gut level instinct, whatever, I listen to that shit. Because I asked a direct question, and remember, most people know what to do, they don't do what they know. Most people know exactly what question they'd want to ask, but they don't ask it because they're afraid of the answer. That's how powerful this intuition is, the wild brain is. We already fucking know the answer, but we don't want to ask the question because we know the answer, and the answer terrifies us. Why? Because we don't have any control over it. Or we're afraid we don't have control over it, or we don't have the skills to take control over it, or whatever it is.
There's something popped in my head when you talked to like, can this happen, or is this happening to me? It made me kind of think about perspective, right? It's almost like the difference between, is it warm or cold outside?
Yeah.
That is like, can this happen to me? And it's like, well, it's 10 degrees Celsius. It's like, well, that is what is happening to you. One is fact and one is perception. Like, do you know what I mean? So like 100%. Really kind of honing in and just being like, no, this is happening. Okay, well then this is happening. And it takes, again, it's everything that we talked about with the worry and the imminent threat and thing like that, but just having that perspective shift, because they're drastically different.
100%. I'll throw one more piece of terminology out here. And that's just, if we look at the logical brain and we look at the denial process and the 5 aspects to that, and that leads to worry, and what worry creates, worry and anxiety can create a state of artificial fear. And it's so funny because like I worry about something, and what I'm worrying about is not likely to be the thing that actually is going to happen. It's the thing that's distracting me from what is happening. So I'm worried about this thing that might happen. It's distracting me from what's actually happened. I'm in an artificial state. I've created a matrix of a kind. And that artificial fear has us completely distracted, because within that, we're finding a certain level of control to that. And that we've all felt that dance that goes on inside our heads when we're worrying about something, but you got to think about it in the right way at the right time with the right angle. And that's almost like that'll prevent that from happening, or whatever it is, right? But that's the state of artificial fear. Whereas again, if we come back to kind of one of the original core concepts here, is like the wild brain and the intuition and the primal part of ourselves, the survival instincts that we are, gifted with from birth, will not allow us to live in that state, because it will not allow us to survive. So again, it comes back to, if we can activate that and restore its status of master, or put it at the high, like the top of the hierarchy, so to speak, right? And figure out how to use it that way, and realign the system, so to speak. We don't live in states of artificial fear, right? So either you can see things for what they are. You can stay in states of action. And yeah, like it's like we still feel things like apprehension. We still feel things like hesitation and doubt, and fear, obviously, and nagging and persistent thoughts. But what's the difference between a nagging or persistent thought, or a gut, like just that almost that sickening, and it's varying degrees, but that feeling in your gut? What's the difference between that and worry and anxiety? Because they are different. Yet they can feel somewhat similar, right? Because we're not saying that when you're in touch with the primal self, you never feel anything. Like you're just like emotionally dead, not even close. But it's a big, big difference between living with some apprehension and doubt and gut instincts and nagging and persistent thoughts. And because that stuff, it's like there's realistic fear, then there's unrealistic fear. Realistic fear has survivable value. Unrealistic fear is just artificial state that's destroys us. It makes us toxic, corrosive, and septic. It'll destroy you from the inside out. And so our whole thing about weaponizing is to understand how to build the emotional intelligence and the mental toughness to live in the right states. Even the bad states, even the quote unquote negative states, they're different than just artificial fear, artificial worry and anxiety that is being created because of denial, which is being created because the logical brain is slow, plodding, and unoriginal, and is bound by reason and logic and how things should be and ought to be and how things you want things to be and perception and all that other shit, which just can do nothing for you in a time of crisis. And that's the picture we're trying to paint. I'm just going to, Mac, I think just posted a question. Do you think there's a place past that point of worry where you don't worry because you believe you can handle or figure out whatever comes? Is that acceptance or is that another side of denial? No, that's a great question. And I want to be clear on this. Like, that is not a place past worry. Worry, like, can someone be in a state of worry and anxiety and created an artificial fear and created this artificial bubble where they're trying to control things, even though they might feel like they have no control, but their worry is the control? Can they go from that state to all of a sudden like being ripped out of that and now they're in the reality of seeing it what it is? Yeah, 100% you can come right out of that. But the idea is that it's like, did they accept? Maybe. They could rationalize and accept finally. It's different than rationalize in denial. Rationalization and acceptance is a different process. Just because the word's the same, you can't be confused by that. So it's like, most people, if they come into that place of worry, anxiety, artificial, and then all of a sudden the reality hits them, most times they suffer a lot more trauma. Because they were deluding themselves, and then when they get hit with, it's like the terror barrier. They can no longer deny it. If we're talking about human crisis, often that happens because all of a sudden now you've been shot, you've been stabbed, you've been beaten, you got the fractured skull. Now it's an imminent, and now there's no more worry. You open the door, there's the lava. Close the door, go sit down in your chair, and worry, and you'll worry about all kinds of things other than what's about to really happen. And then all of a sudden, your feet are being melted off because the lava hits you and it's excruciating, it's all this stuff, and you're no longer in worry. So can they sit in their chair worrying and all of a sudden the whole front half of their house melts away and they go, fuck this shit, and start running? Yep. They're out of worry and they're into reality. And now they're into action. So, that I hope that kind of makes sense, is that it's there's the denial, there's the worry, there's the artificial, and then there's the real. Can they snap out of that? Something typically pulls them out of it. Maybe they rationalize and accept the realities of what it is, start seeing, just, you know what I mean? Maybe they needed that buffer zone. All of a sudden, the primal wild brain inside of them, their survival mechanism kicks in, and that voice goes from the quietest little voice to the loudest voice and starts screaming. Because don't underestimate how desperately we want to survive. And I use this analogy in my ebook that I wrote. I use the analogy of or I think I used an ebook, or maybe it was a different lecture, can't remember. But people no, I don't believe all this stuff, whatever, right? Grab somebody by the hair, pull them out into a fucking pool or the ocean and shove their head under the water and see what they do. There's people that when you grab them by the hair and you start dragging them to the water, they'll go, what? He won't do it. How could he do it? There's people around. He can't murder me in broad daylight with witnesses. That'd be psychotic. They're just rationalizing away they'd go through all that stuff. Put them under the water. They'd panic. They'd be kicking and screaming quite a bit, most of them. But in their brains, they're thinking what?
He'll let me up.
He'll let me up. He'll let me up. Right? Some people, the second that their head goes under or the second of the water, they'll go into a phobic scale response. At some point inside of yourself, the wild brain is going to start screaming. It's going to start kicking and fighting. And that depends how much power and credit the logical brain has. You see, it's like, maybe this is my one last analogy because there's so many angles to try to come at this from, but and we've read this in the survival studies of people that have faced violence, and understand that the logical brain is an ally most times to the person committing the assault. Right? A violent offender, a violent guy grabs a woman by the throat and begins to force her into her apartment. He encounters her, engages her outside of her apartment building. He follows her in. He grabs her. He's forcing her up the stairs. He's wanting her to open the door, dragging her house. Every part of her is screaming to make her stand right there potentially. Let's just say that's what her intuition's telling her to do. Fight. Right now, right here, make noise. Like, don't go to the second location. Don't allow him to do this. Fight. What's the logical brain telling her? This guy's screaming, shut the fuck up and I won't kill you. Shut the fuck up and I won't hurt you. I will fucking shoot you. Don't make a fucking peep. Don't make a sound. What's your logical brain doing?
She's like, well, maybe if I do those things, he won't hurt me. He'll let me go. He'll have mercy on me. He'll, whatever the situation.
He says, then everything will be okay. I'll be fine.
She turns to him and says, I have kids. Don't do this. I have kids. I have parents. I have a family. Don't hurt me. She begins to rationally try to negotiate with him. Now, can that tactic work? Can the wild brain intuit that? Can the wild brain kick you into a state where you manipulate and use different behavioral redirects? Of course it can. I'm just trying to draw a contrast here that what can happen is the bad guy often tells us how to beat him. Don't make a fucking sound. Meaning what? If you scream right now, this is going to really fuck up my shit. Yep. They tell us, get in the fucking car. Nobody gets hurt. Don't get in the car or you're going to get hurt. Like literally just mirror whatever they say. And they're telling you what's bad shit. They're telling you how to beat them. And they're telling you what shit's bad is about to happen. But the logical brain goes, a violent offender, logically, rationally, males, right? The guys that game, like, I'll fucking shoot you. Like, they're telling you and stating intentions, and yet we don't want to believe what they're saying to us. But what they're saying and how they're behaving actually aligns with what our logical brain is saying many, many times. So they become allied. Now think about that. Violent predators, if they understand that, will they use that?
Of course.
They'll use
it. Put it this way. One of the segments I want to do, I've been thinking about this, that I do like bad guy blueprint breakdowns where I take video of actual assaults and I break it down and I show people different pins and indicators and things that you can see. My whole goal primarily is to show people not what to do once the assault happens. It's to show people when the assault actually happened. Look at all the indicators, recognize these things, read the signs, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to avoid the situation in the first place. And then of course we can teach what happens if you can't in a different process. One of the things I want to do is how would I do it? How would I do it? Or how I do it. I don't have a great title. It's a work in progress. But the idea is I'll take, and I do this for myself as part of my training, right? I'll take a CCTV footage, like I'll take an assault that somebody did, and I will critique the bad guy. I'll critique him and say, that guy was a fucking idiot. Look what he did. That's so efficient. That person could have done this. That person could have got away from him like this. That person could have fought back like this. That person could have this. That person this. If I was him, I'd have done it this way. I'd do it this way. I like literally look at it and figure out ways that I could have improved upon the bad guy's attack plan, his blueprints. And people will sit there and go, that's fucking twisted. No, it's not. If I can't understand if I can't understand their blueprint, if I can't understand their thinking, their reasoning of why they would do what they're doing, that means I don't understand violence. That means how am I teaching someone to defend themselves against an attack when I don't even understand why a criminal would do what they do? I have to have the capacity to think evil.
Well, what professional sports team wouldn't want to have a look at their opponent's playbook?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exact same thing.
If anyone, what we just said right now, go back and find our podcast. I think number 2 on in our Appletunes. Go back and find the number 2, Hard Realities. Listen to that podcast, because what we just did was hit people with something they don't want to look at, which is the hard realities. You have to study the enemy's playbook. And not only do you have to study their playbook, you have to improve upon it. You know, let me flip the context. My wife goes out, my wife gets attacked. But because I've studied how men attack women, both men that are known to them and strangers, both, right? But if I've studied that and she studied that, and we sat down one night and said, listen, I'm not going to teach you how to defend against their attack. The first thing I'm going to teach you how to do is we're going to look at it and figure out how they could do it fucking better. And from her perspective, she goes, well, I'll tell you what, if they did this, if they did that, if they did this, that would make it infinitely harder on me. Now you're in a different frame of mind. Now all of a sudden she's out somewhere and she sees something. She recognizes an opportunity that would give them a greater advantage. And so she does something to take away that advantage before it ever became an advantage. But she could never get there. You could never see that opportunity and capitalize on it if you have not put yourself in the perspective, the empathy to see it through the bad guy's eyes. To be willing to go in there and accept the hard reality, see it for what it is, accept it for what it is, and then fucking make the counters for that shit. Outthink, outwit, outstrategize, right? The bad guys think evil. The good guys say fucking doom on you. Right? That's the difference. Doom on you, motherfucker. I know you. I know you're an evil. I see the darkness in your heart. I've seen it. I've looked at it. I've studied it. I've accepted it for what it is. And yet, 2 things happen. 1, my view of the world remains unchanged. The majority of people are good fucking people. And if you needed help, they'd be there to help you in your darkest moments. The majority of people are good people. But I've also seen and accepted the second part. There are people on this planet that if you give them even half an opportunity, they will fucking hurt and destroy you. They will take everything that you hold dear. Right? When you can see it from that perspective and understand that, remain unchanged by that, you can think evil, because the mind is the greatest concealed weapon. The bad guy uses it to think evil, but I am equipped with the same fucking mind. I am equipped and born with the same innate survival system, and to you that think evil, I say fucking doom on you. We flip the narrative. Everything we do is to doom on you. Doom on your fucking plan. Doom on you to what you think you're going to do to me. Right? Because moral, law-abiding citizens, we have the right to life, liberty, freedom, and security, and not have our life, liberty, freedom, and security infringed upon. The only thing that happens in the middle of that is what we do to make sure that we come home at the end of the day. That's the process. That's where all of this comes into play. Okay, Mac had another comment. Automatically, you're already problem solving it when you do that. 100% you are. 100%. Okay, anything you guys want to add to that? Any part of the conversation?
You know what? I'll kind of final thoughts. Intuition, it seems like it's a big buzzword. Like books coming out about intuition, and everybody's like, oh, just use your intuition, like focus harder. And, I think when you're, it's easy to say, right? But when you're weaponizing, it's like, to truly understand your intuition, to truly get back in touch with that intuition, is you want to know it. You want to, like what we talked about tonight, you want to know the messengers of intuition. You want to know your intuition's greatest competitor. And it's like, by understanding that information, you truly are getting in touch with the wild brain, with your intuitive nature, and therefore going to be able to just listen to it when it's talking to you, because you understand it. Again, like it's so easy to be like, well, just listen to your intuition. It's like, yeah, but if you don't know what language it's speaking, because you're just like, I'll just listen to it, then you're kind of not gonna maximize the benefits of what it's even telling you and what it's there for.
100%. Dustin, anything you want to throw in?
Just one comment, from your webinar, that workshop that you offer. When you're talking about like learning the physical side of things, you talk to people like, be careful what you practice because you might get good at it. Well, I think that kind of applies the same to like
100%.
worry and denial. And not that you're actively practicing it, but like you said earlier, you're conditioned. You know, your whole life you've been conditioned to worry about things. You've been conditioned to be in denial. So it's like, yeah, be careful. Be catch on to the fact that you've been conditioned to do these things,
Yeah.
and now you got to break that conditioning.
Yep. 100%. Great reference back to that. Yeah. Be careful what you practice. You just might get good at the wrong thing. And you get really good at the denial process. And in a lot of ways and a lot of times when it comes to survival, that is the wrong thing to get good at. Right. So yeah, I really like that. And I guess my last thing is, we spend a lot of this time breaking down and getting people to see it for what it is, like understand the battle that's going on inside of you. If there's one piece that I could add into people, because there has to be the question saying, okay, listen, what's one thing I can do right now to begin to change the hierarchy? Put my wild brain, the primal self, back to the master. And yes, the logic brain is great, but it has to fall in line and be of service to the wild brain. What's the one thing I can do right now? And one of the things that the number one thing I would say with that is that practice the art of acceptance, in the sense that, like, questions are what change our paradigms. Questions, most things cannot stand up to questions. You know, if I have a belief, even a really strong, firmly held belief, if somebody has the ability to question me every day about that belief for 15 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, but they just get to question me, question it. How many days would it take before I asked myself, I wonder if I got this right? Like, how many days would it take? How many hours? How many minutes would it take till I had even just a flinge, a tweak of self-doubt? Not many.
Mm-hmm.
Not many. Because again, the logical brain, we're rational people. We begin to think. So question yourself and do it in not in a negative way. What am I choosing not to see? Is this happening to me? Will this happen to me? One of the most powerful exercises that I ever came across, and I can't remember the origins of where this question came from. It was in a book that I read or a course that I was taking, but the essence was this. Not only was it about questioning, learning to ask better questions of yourself, but this is where my concept of like creating a war room, in the theater of my mind, I go into a war room where I've created a safe space where I can go into my war room and put all of my problems on the table. And it's tied into this kind of questioning. What would you do? Like, what would change if you could put every problem and every possible solution, if you could just put everything on the table with no bias? Meaning, I put something on the table and say, well, if this is happening to me, that would mean this. And that would be almost too much to take. But if I'm in a space, if I can create a space where I go, listen, no judgment. I see everything for what it is. Is this happening to me? Will this happen to me? You know what I mean? What am I choosing not to see? I have learned that I can put things onto the table that are horrifying to me. Things that I just so deep, on my deepest level, do not want to be true. But in that space, I can put them on there and I can breathe into that and I can see things for what they are. And then it's much easier for me to rationalize and accept it. It doesn't mean that you don't have the emotional pushback. You have times where you feel physically ill, but there's things where it's like the denial process doesn't have the survivable value that I need it to have. So yes, I understand, and at times I can appreciate its compartmentalization and keeping unwanted information from me, but what's the process? So the number one thing is look at the questions that you habitually ask yourself in moments of worry. Ask better questions, and you will destabilize and take the legs out of the logical brain. And that's why I tried to share, 2 or 3 power questions, as I call them, that if you get good at asking and answering those questions, that's one of the best ways, the most expedient ways I can tell you to get back in touch with the primal self. And I guess on that note, I'll leave you with one last question that I use at tons with myself is, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? I ask myself that a ton. What would I have to believe in order to feel this way? I'm feeling something. What would I have to believe? Well, I'd have to believe this. And 99% of the time when I answer that question, what would you believe? What would you have to believe, Greg, to feel this way? Well, I'd have to believe that this person thinks this, or that this is happening, this is happening. And as I'm saying it, I already know I'm full of shit. And I'm like, fuck. So ask yourself better questions. Sorry, I'm just going to pop on Max. I think just being told or understanding and trust your intuition is huge. 100% it is, Max. All right, guys, so that's it. A little bit longer tonight, but that's okay. It was a great conversation, guys. A really deep topic. Hopefully, we were able to paint the picture and offer some, at least get people thinking, questioning, reevaluating, or even reaffirming and reasserting your trust within your intuition. All of it would be a success for us tonight. So I want to thank you for joining us. Don't forget, you can check us out and find our Education Weaponized podcast anywhere you can get your podcast. So we finally just got launched on Apple. So get over there. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, give us a rating, preferably 5 stars so that we can reach more people. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, then don't leave nothing, or one side.
Doom on you.
Doom on you. Do what you got to do. But definitely, we appreciate your time. We will be back for the strategy session next Thursday. Every Thursday live here on Facebook. Then it goes to our podcast, gets uploaded. Stay safe, stay weaponized, and we will chat again soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotector.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotector.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotector.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.